Let's do it.
All right, guys, welcome back to the BBR podcast. I am so excited to introduce my special guest, Kim West from whenitsnotforever.com. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Dave.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for coming all this way from Austin. You didn't come here just for the podcast.
Maybe. I don't know. No, I had lots of work. I wanted to do some heads down work in town and just reconnect with friends and with nature. Because as much as I love Austin at this time of year, it's about 100 degrees every day and feels like it's hotter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thanks for taking the time to come and chat with me about who you are, what you do, and why you're so passionate about it. So
For sure.
I know a little bit about you, but let's introduce you to our listeners and tell me how you got started with what it is that you do.
Sure. Let's see. So I moved out to Colorado originally from the East Coast in 2007 to pursue grad school. I got my law degree and my MBA at the University of Colorado. And in coming out of grad school, I had a really great year, to be honest. I was, finally done with school at the age of 26 after spending an additional 4 years after college. So it was a really long haul of being in school. And finally got a great job lined up. I was really fortunate in that. And I married my partner of 7 years. And so it was just, an incredible year for me in 2011. And unfortunately, within about a year and a half, my marriage really just imploded. Never saw it coming, or, anyone who gets married wouldn't get married if they thought they were ever going to get divorced. And so that was very much the case. And didn't see it coming, felt really vulnerable and frankly afraid when I was going through the whole process, just because I'd been with my partner for almost 9 years at that point, and I'd really grown up with him. I was 19 when we started dating, and so I really came into my adulthood with him by my side, and he really shaped a lot of who I was. Which was probably problematic as a separate thing. Put a pin in that. But yeah, so I found myself, very isolated, navigating the divorce process. I had a support network, so it isn't to say or undervalue the fact that I did have family and friends who cared about me and were there for me as much as they could be. But my parents have been happily married for 43 years now. They're on the East Coast, and they had no idea what to tell me. No one saw this coming. It was just very unexpected and surprising. And most of my friends at that point, I was 28, and most of my friends were just getting married, but not navigating the divorce process either. So I did my best and fumbled my way through the process and learned a lot, grew a lot, especially in the ensuing couple of years following my divorce. Just poured myself into personal growth, figured out, how to figure out really who I was, my identity. So did a ton of identity work and just kind of exploration. And luckily I was in Colorado, so I threw myself into a lot of healthy habits. Maybe went a little too far with the fitness and some of the healthy habits. So it could have been worse, but at the same point, I learned and grew so much. And what really led me to this line of work was a couple of years after my divorce, after having that experience, one of my best friends from grade school, actually we went to school from the age of 4 to 17 together back east. She reached out to me, and she had learned that her partner had been cheating on her, and it was a similar situation to how my marriage collapsed. And she reached out to me in tears and just completely desperate for help and guidance. And she just asked me, Kim, how did you do this? Like, how did you get through this horrible, your life shattering around you, and that person who you thought was your best friend and knew you better than anyone else, like that level of betrayal. And when she came to me with that level of pain, I realized, I could help her through it. I could give her advice. And I realized that this was something that I felt drawn to really, give back in that capacity and help others through that transition in a way that I would have, appreciated having a similar level of support. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started When It's Not Forever in 2017.
So by sharing your personal story, others were gravitating to you and asking you questions as an expert, because you lived it, you went through it, and you came out of it better off in the end.
It's true, I did, and I feel fortunate. I think that can be the case for almost anyone, but it takes a certain perspective and mindset and shift that isn't always possible right away, because with any breakup, with any long-term relationship, you have to allow some time and space for the grieving process, and sometimes people get stuck there. And it can happen, I mean, even just without a breakup, with the loss, with loss through death of a friend or loved one, you can really get stuck in that grief process. And if you're not able to sort of shift your perspective on that and get into a healthier place, it can be really difficult to move forward and get to a place where you're happy again and really thriving.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. How did you choose personal growth and healthy habits instead of maybe staying stuck where a lot of people find themselves right after a breakup?
Sure, and let's be clear, I did have some unhealthy habits too. I definitely had nights where I had too much wine. However, I think that honestly, being in the environment I was in Colorado, because I was living in Boulder at the time, Old Lafayette, I was fortunate in that I was in a good environment where I could explore new, fun activities, such as rock climbing. I got into rock climbing just a few years ago. And so that was great. Just having a healthy playground around me to kind of leverage and take advantage of was wonderful. And I find, I love meditation, but before I actually started meditating, I think my version of meditation was to go for long runs. Usually in the morning before work, I would just find it really cathartic and meditative to just go out, hit the road for 8 miles, and I would just think and process things. And so that I found just really helpful, giving myself some space. I think we can often, not to disparage the podcast, but we can sometimes get in the habit of consuming so much content that we don't allow ourselves the time and space to just process anymore and sit with all that we've been going through and all that we've been experiencing. So I think that while it's amazing and very good to consume content for personal growth purposes, it's also good just to give yourself that space every now and then and that quiet to really kind of unravel what it is you've been going through.
To avoid that paralysis by analysis that business owners get into, leadership roles get into, where they're just like, I'm going to overanalyze everything so that I can dissect it and then I'll fix it. Yeah. I'll figure it out along the way. So a buddy of mine over this weekend at the men's retreat simply just said, I'm going to consume my personal growth content slower. I'm actually going to read maybe 2 chapters of this book and then process it, and then come back to it later, which, I'm a pretty intense guy. I'm an all in or all out kind of a guy. And when I do start consuming educational material and content, I start at the beginning and I'll binge it and then I'll finish it. I'll go through an Audible book in a week and then turn to podcasts for the rest of the week. Sure. Because I absolutely hate a silent commute. And Denver traffic is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's worse than when you left.
I get that, and I drive a stick shift, so I'm sensitive to it.
Well, good. As I was getting to know you and your business, I had a question. Was it hard to leave the consistent, not 9 to 5, or like just being secure in your career for an entrepreneurial adventure?
Definitely. Yes, and it took me some time. I'd come up with the name and I'd started writing kind of about my divorce in various capacities without sharing it for at least a year or 2 before I took the leap. And I had studied entrepreneurship a lot. And it's funny because that doesn't actually set you up to do well as an entrepreneur. But I think that's how I tend to approach things. I come from this academic background and find safety and security in that, more certainty, I guess, and over preparation. So I mean, I'd done a double major in marketing and management in undergrad, and then focused on entrepreneurial law and transactional IP in law school, so trademarks, copyrights, and just startup small business issues, and focused in entrepreneurship in my MBA. And so I'd done all this kind of upfront studying, but it's such a different animal to actually jump in and and start your own venture, as I'm sure you know. And so
3 times over now.
Right? Yeah. And so it's its own MBA. It's its own program.
When you go through it in real life.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I definitely played the game of having the secure corporate job and dreaming, writing on the side and figuring out like, how could I make this work? What connections would I need to make? What are the steps I need to do to carry out? And I think I was a little fortunate in that I had studied it from the legal perspective. I understood how to register my own LLC. I understood how to register for a trademark, things like that came in handy. You don't need to know how to do those things. They're easy. You can
super
easily
easy.
do them. But it helped having, I guess, that lower barrier to entry of my own understanding. And finally, it just took the passion. Like it was sooner or later, it was not wanting to work in a cube any longer. Not to disparage that for anyone who works in a cube.
I'm sure that they've thought the same exact thing. It's like these small 4 walls and a half and no ceiling whatsoever.
Right.
It's wearing on me.
Yeah. But I mean, it has its pros and its cons, just like anything else. Entrepreneurship does as well. But yeah, I felt really driven to do it. And once you start doing something that feels so in alignment, I think that driver really propels you forward. And sure, there are days where you're afraid, you're not sure how this is gonna work, and you figure it out, just like anything else, you have to be willing to fail.
Over and over and over again. Yeah.
And not personally identify with that or internalize it too much, because that'll eat you up.
Been there.
Yeah, totally.
For sure. And so your flexibility in the entrepreneurship allows you to travel, which is a big passion of yours.
Yes, definitely.
What's next? Where are you headed next? Back home to Austin?
That's a good question. Yeah, so I'll be in Austin in the near future. Although in August, I hear it's awful. So I just moved to Austin in January from Colorado, and so I'm experiencing my first Austin summer. And I have a small dog, and she and I are coping with the heat, but she's not a water-loving dog, and I'm more of a mountains girl at heart than lakes, although they're nice. So we're figuring it out as we go. But yeah, I'm sure I'll escape a little bit in August, maybe the Pacific Northwest. We'll see.
We were talking about Portland before we hit record. So I was poking around on the website.
Yeah.
Whenitsnotforever.com, and that's cute because it's KNOT.
Like time
the knot. And when I bumped into you on Instagram, that's what stood out at me. I'm like, that's really clever.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. But I noticed one of your online courses, it's how to get through a divorce.
Yeah.
What can somebody expect to experience there and then after?
Sure. So yeah, I do have this basically overview course. It's a mini course on how to get divorced. And the idea there is just to really expectation set. So you can download a PDF roadmap of what the general divorce process entails, keeping in mind that obviously it's a different process in every state. There are different state statutes. So it might take a different amount of time or have different specific requirements. But the general process actually looks the same nationwide. So some of the high-level things that you can expect, first of all, there about approximately 5 different routes you can take to getting divorced, which I really wish I'd known going through it. I didn't research that much, frankly. I came at it from already having a law degree and knowing the value lawyers have to offer, and that's true, but you can actually get through it sometimes more cheaply, more economically, more efficiently, without retaining an attorney, but you have to really have circumstances that allow for that, and they're very specific. So I wouldn't recommend just doing that blindly without getting guidance.
But if they want to know more, they can.
Yeah, they can reach out to me. I offer free consultations. Yes, but there are generally 5 different routes. From litigation to mediation, arbitration, doing it yourself. There's something called collaborative divorce, where you kind of have both of your attorneys at the table along with other experts. So there are all different sorts of ways you can get through it. And they have different pros and cons, just like everything in life. There are trade-offs. So I'll give you, in the course I give an overview of what those ways are to navigate through the process, the pros and cons of each. Again, the roadmap of what to expect. You have to go through a financial disclosures process that's pretty painful. I'd say it's worse than applying for a mortgage.
Probably.
It's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Maybe even worse than applying to take the bar exam. But but yeah, it's bad. And then beyond that, you know, it's really a negotiation process of figuring out with your partner, you know, how you're going to be splitting things up and allocating things. And, you know, especially if children are in the mix, it increases the level of complexity pretty quickly. And I recommend some resources that you should probably leverage that you might not be thinking of. One that is fairly obvious perhaps is some sort of psychological support, whether that's, you know, a counselor, therapist, coach, whatever it might be, just to help you get through it in a way where you're still, you know, in alignment, maybe keeping the wheels on the bus in terms of your job or your other relationships, your children, whatever it might be. One that people, I think, don't think of as often, though, is the financial aspects, and thinking through what the tax implications might be of their debt and asset split with their partner down the road. So, you know, you're thinking about how to split things up and what's fair, and that's great. That's one aspect of the whole process, but another is, what are the tax implications of the decisions you're making that you might not really be thinking through? So I highly recommend people connect with different resources on the financial side, such as, you know, maybe a CPA who specializes in divorce, or a CDFA, a certified divorce financial analyst. Again, if you need referrals, come to me. I'm always happy to help with that. But yeah, those are really excellent resources that I stress can be super helpful.
Sure, the CDFA is new to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I don't ever plan on going through a divorce again.
I hope you don't. Yeah, completely.
I mean,
yeah.
shoot, it's been 14 years. Maddie's almost 17 now.
Oh my gosh.
She'll be 17 in August.
That's
Can't
amazing.
believe it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. Yeah, I didn't have children when I was going through the process myself, just my dog. but yeah, it's definitely a tough process to go through, and especially with kids in the mix. It just, in some ways, it gives you a common ground, you know, with your ex, to try to figure out how to move forward. But yeah, it can be obviously incredibly difficult and painful.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna voluntarily go through that again.
Completely. Yeah.
So I was poking around on the website, and you have some really good advice for people dating after divorce.
Yeah.
And you broke it down into seven things you want them to know. And I have a few questions about maybe 4 of them, because
okay.
Let's talk about expectations and
okay.
projecting expectations onto your new partner.
Yeah, definitely.
So what kind of experience or tips and tools do you have to maybe manage your own expectations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough area. So to provide a little context to this, I personally found, and I've seen this in others and friends who've been through divorces, or even just long-term relationships that they're breaking up from and re-entering the dating world from. And what I've seen and experienced is that, you know, you've been in this long-term relationship and you've learned these certain habits and patterns, and they've become ingrained. You know, you can look into neuro-linguistic programming and all sorts of habit formation tools and tips, and basically you just really form these tough patterns, and they're ingrained, and you don't even necessarily notice them. They become subconscious. So the way that you might interact with someone new that you're dating is usually largely informed by your past habits and patterns from your previous relationship. And that can be bad. Not only if those habits in and of themselves on the surface level are not serving you or not serving your partner, or unhealthy inherently, but also just if you're taking things from a previous relationship and a previous person, that's a very unique situation usually. I mean, everyone is very unique, and your relationships are going to be unique inherently. And so if you're bringing that into your new relationship or your new, you know, partner dating scenario, and carrying over those same habits and patterns without really getting to wipe the slate clean and forge new patterns based on the two of you, or consciously, you know, develop these based on health, can be a bit disastrous.
That's why I always recommend to our listeners to take a break after a relationship ends.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of times where people bounce from one to the next,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no time to reset and to fix those patterns that were the cause of a breakup in the first place.
Right. And I firmly believe, I mean, even even in the worst circumstances of a breakup where it's very one-sided, I do feel like both people can always stand to grow. I mean, I think that just in general, we can always stand to grow and improve ourselves.
In or out of a relationship.
Sure, yeah. And I think that through a breakup, you can learn a lot. Again, you have to be open to wanting to learn a lot and grow, but I think we always have that opportunity, and I think that it can be really beneficial to leverage those opportunities when you're going through a huge life transition, such as a breakup. To really reflect on, what went well, what wasn't so great, how could you be a better version of yourself for a future partner, what can you learn from the whole situation and how it unfolded. And so similarly, with these expectations, just being aware of what your expectations are, or your triggers are, and what you might be bringing into a new relationship. And I think that it can definitely take some time for you to really figure that out and do the work. So I agree with you. I think that ideally, if you can take a break, it's probably not only for your own benefit, but for your future partner's benefit that you've done that and taken the time and space to do some work on yourself. Yeah.
From what I know, you took about 2 years off.
Here and there. I mean, I would say I definitely dated, and I think I fell into some of these habits. Some of the things that I share in my blog. I've definitely experienced it myself and share it based on my own learnings and my own mistakes. So I'm in no way holding myself out as like perfect or having done this well. I think we learn so much from our own mistakes. But yeah, I do think that I will say I poured myself into personal growth. I had, a therapist when I was going through my divorce, and then I got a coach, basically from the Tony Robbins organization, and went through a lot of that coaching, and then my own training to become a coach. And there's just so much you can learn from that, about yourself, and also it allows you to reflect on what you want in a relationship going forward, which I think is a moving target. What I wanted what I thought I wanted when I was 28 is different than what I want now at the age of 34. And it's evolved, just as we evolve as humans. And so I think it's important to kind of reevaluate that every once in a while and be clear on it so that you're intentionally approaching, finding the right partner for you that will align with whatever it is that you really want in life.
Yeah, it's a moving target. I like that kind of analogy.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Good. Let me check my next question.
Sure.
When you're reprogramming, maybe not reprogramming, but when you're reframing what you want after a breakup or after a divorce and you take the time, why is mindset so important when you begin to reframe your mindset about the dating process?
Sure. So I think mindset in general is really important. I don't think we give it enough credit, or enough due. I love diving into Stoicism, if you're at all a fan of that, but reading some Stoic philosophy I think is a really great way to nerd out on that area of mindset.
Sure. And do you have a favorite Stoic philosopher?
Oh man.
Epicurus or Mark
Love
Antony?
Epicurus. I would say Marcus Aurelius probably would be my go-to. Meditations. I love so much in that category though, and it does kind of meld together. It dovetails really well between them all. But so mindset. If as I was saying earlier, if you're stuck in this place of victimhood, let's say you were sort of I don't know, maybe the victim in your relationship's demise, however you view that, and you're coming out of it with that mentality of woe is me, and just feeling that way and approaching the dating world and moving forward that way, it can really hold you back in tough ways. So it almost is a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. You're gonna usually find somebody who feels familiar, and that can also be an issue just with love. How you perceived love as you were being raised as a child, that can carry forward as well, and perpetuate in certain ways. But with mindset, I find that if you're willing to really, be optimistic, be hopeful, be vulnerable, be brave, which goes hand in hand with vulnerability, which is so much easier said than done.
No doubt about that.
And really just reflect on your own work to be done and how you'd like to improve. I think that having that mindset and staying open, it tends to attract people into your life that are similarly minded. And I think that that's really important, you know, in terms of attracting the right people, surrounding yourself with people that you want to be more like, whether those are, you know, happy and active people, whatever it might be. But I think that mindset is crucial to really healing and moving forward, and, you know, just being happy in life and figuring out what that looks like or what that means to you.
Yeah, happiness is not brought on with somebody else. Happiness starts with ourselves first, and then we find happiness with somebody else.
Definitely.
You said vulnerability and bravery. Are you a fan of Brene Brown?
Very much. Very much. Yeah, I got to see her speak actually at the University of Colorado. I guess it was about a year and a half ago, somewhere in there. Yes, I love Brene Brown.
Sure. What is it in particular about her teachings and her research that resonates with you?
So, I love how she's willing to put herself out there. She walks the talk for sure. I love that she has brought the veil kind of down around shame and vulnerability and those topics that we don't really like to talk about for societal reasons, you know, enculturation reasons. They're topics that have been really taboo, and she really brings out, you know, the two sides of the coin when it comes to vulnerability, you know, that it allows for so much when you have it, and that vulnerability is really synonymous with courage and bravery, and, you know, stepping into the arena, and daring greatly, and all of these wonderful things. And you can't really have one without the other. They really are required together to allow you to have all of the good that can come from it. But you do have to be willing to take that risk, take that leap, and you're gonna get hurt, you know?
Oh, for sure.
So you have to be willing to accept that, and if it hurts, you're probably moving in the right direction.
Yeah, because nothing ever worth doing was easy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Agree. Yeah.
So I've asked a lot of people their personal and professional opinions on whether vulnerability requires full transparency. And when Brene Brown talks about the floodlighting, in Daring Greatly, that chapter leapt out at me because I just figured I would lay it all out there and people would either accept or walk away, and that's fine. And that's a huge risk, which is what you were taking. I accepted the risk when I was completely transparent.
Sure.
In my opinion, you can be transparent without being vulnerable.
Okay.
And you can be vulnerable without being completely transparent.
Yeah. I like that. I think there's a fine line, and Brene Brown talks about this as well in terms of, you know, oversharing in certain ways and sharing with people who haven't earned the right for you to be vulnerable with them. So I think that there's a little bit of responsibility and onus on the individual to really figure out, you know, have I established a level of trust with this individual, and that have they really earned the right to share vulnerably, you know, with. And sometimes I think social media is the scapegoat that she refers to in terms of oversharing and just putting everything out there to everyone.
It's a great example. Because I know as the audience members, we see it.
Yeah.
We definitely do. A
Sure.
friend was going through a divorce and announced it on social media. And knowing what Brene Brown has done as far as research and vulnerability and transparency and floodlighting, I was taken aback a little bit. Doesn't make me love her any less. It just simply makes me aware of the platform and the audience, and our story is a privilege.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your story vulnerably, because that's what kind of brought us together, gravitated one of us, each of us to the other, right? Because otherwise a story wouldn't resonate with me about the divorce process. I'm 14 years out of it.
Sure.
But I can still appreciate and respect how you share your story.
Well, thank you. And it's my why. It's, you know, going to Simon Sinek. It's why I started my business, and it's what makes my work so fulfilling for me on a daily basis. Being able to help others navigate the divorce process and really get to a place where they're thriving post-divorce. You know, it not only gives meaning to my own experience and what I went through, But it also just is just, yeah, it's so meaningful. It's such a privilege to be able to help people and have people come to me at the lowest point in their lives and help them get to, such a better place. And so, yeah, so that's why I do share my story. It was not easy at first, and I felt a lot of conflict around it, inner conflict. And there's certainly there are boundaries that you have to set for yourself and figure out for yourself, and try to be respectful to any other people in those stories, and what their wishes might be. And so it's a tough line to walk sometimes.
What skills did you have stand out to help you process everything within the 2 years or 5 years since? Mm-hmm. Is it journaling? Is it the counseling? Is it coaching? Or is it simply just having that support system that you were talking about earlier?
I'd say it's all of the above. Not to cop out and do the multiple choice easy answer, but really, I think that it's different for each individual. However you process grief, there's no right or wrong way to process grief. However it is that works best for you, it's good to experiment and figure out. It's good to also just realize on a high level what's a healthy way versus an unhealthy way, so that hopefully you're doing more healthy ways than not. But for me, writing definitely was a great way for me to dive in and share my experience, if I chose to share it. Some of my writing I have not shared, and won't. And some of it,
a lot of it's not meant to be.
Sure.
It's meant for you.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I mentioned running, being meditative. That was really helpful for me to process. I definitely looked for help externally. I do not have a background in counseling or psychology, apart from taking a couple abnormal psych classes in college for fun. So I do not hold myself out as an expert in that domain either. And I really respect and love to leverage other people who have expertise in their own domains. Stay in your lane type situation. So.
The podcast is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. You're passionate about helping people here and now.
Right.
Your sharing of your story comes, what I see, naturally to you. Mm-hmm. It's never come naturally to me.
Okay. Yeah.
I had to understand over the last 17, 20 years that vulnerability is a strength and not a weakness.
Yeah.
And that's where I have a hard time writing
mm-hmm.
about my story so that other people can see it.
Sure.
However, journaling for myself, by myself, never meant to be read, is one of the top skills that I found help me work through.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Yeah, I think that really figuring out whatever it is that works for you it can be really powerful and really helpful. Some people, I think, whatever the creative process is that maybe speaks to them, whether that's art, drawing, painting, pottery, whatever it might be, making music, if you're a musician or musically talented or inclined, all sorts of things like that I think can be really helpful to just process things and start to move on. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's come back to dating.
Sure.
I know we just went like personal growth philosophy and Stoic philosophy in there too. The men's group I go to every other night is based in like Stoic philosophy, and we're reading from different books each week to get the conversation started. So mm-hmm. that's a safe place for me to be vulnerable with other men, which has never been easy for me, mm-hmm. as I'm sure it's not easy for a lot of men to be vulnerable with other men.
That's true. Yeah.
So why would you recommend that you date outside of their type?
Outside of their type. So I think that it's a good exploratory process, especially coming from, the background that I came from. I was a serial monogamist, arguably still am, it depends, but I've tried to push myself out of that and in this exact way of dating outside my type. And so I highly recommend it, and here's why. We tend to, as I mentioned, fall into these ingrained patterns and habits that become subconscious. And so we tend to just be attracted to the same sorts of people over and over and over again. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily allow for us to grow, or it doesn't push for us to grow. And so there are a couple of reasons why I think this can be helpful. One is that, as I was mentioning earlier, actually, the way that we grew up and how we saw love modeled for us, we tend to perpetuate in our future relationships. And that can be bad if love that was modeled for us toxic, was in any way, I don't know, just not healthy, not serving one or both partners. And so, you know, if we witnessed any sort of emotional abuse situation growing up, we view that then as love. That's what we learn as, you know, as love and identify as love. And so we want love, and we want to, you know, find love, but at the same time, we tend to be, you know, we're attracted to the familiar, really, at its core, because that feels safe. We understand what that is, even if it's not ideal, and that isn't going to bring us ultimate happiness. At least it's safe, secure, we understand it, so we tend to, you know, find that and be attracted to that and perpetuate that. And so I think that for that reason, it can be good to, you know, be bold and date outside your type. I think that you can learn a lot about yourself, about what, you know, things you might like that you never would have known, whether that's activities, whether that's just things, you know, traits about the other person that really align well with you. So I think you can just learn a ton about yourself, and it does push you to grow and figure out, you know, what it is that you really want, and how does that align with the people that you've been dating, and how might that be challenged in a positive way by stepping outside of your familiar comfort zone.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And you mentioned maybe the modeling that you grew up with, or the examples that you see in your relationships in your youth, say like your teenage years, your young 20s.
Right.
And if there happens to be emotional abuse or verbal abuse in there, dating outside of your type may actually prevent you from gravitating to that same type of familiarity. And there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score,
Yes.
Where he works with veterans, but he also researched and talked about maybe sex workers who are gravitating to that same type of sexual encounter outside of their workplace or outside of their norm, because that's familiar to them.
Yeah.
So it's a great piece of advice to break that pattern.
Right. And all of this is easier said than done.
For sure.
Because the first step is self-awareness, is realizing, oh, hey, like I have a type. Like I gravitate toward this. Or if you catch yourself ever saying, like, why does this keep happening to me? Or have something that keeps repeating, keeps coming up, it's usually a sign. Like it's a sign of something that you should probably dive deeper on and explore a little more.
Yeah, trust your gut when it comes to recognizing patterns, for sure.
Yeah.
I had 2 3.5 year relationships back to back. I had some break in between.
Yeah.
And okay, well, why is it at 3.5 years that they end? Well, okay, recognized what the patterns were, and spent the last couple years of trying to erase those patterns and break free of that bad habit.
Sure. And you know, you can only control your side of things. That's the other complication of relationships. As if we weren't complex enough as individuals, when you're involving another person, it's dynamic. So you can only do so much. You can only do your side of the work on your own. And then beyond that, it might take, you know, couples counseling or working, you know, with a coach together, whatever it might be, with your partner to figure out, you know, how to navigate those transitions, because it's wonderful to have the self-awareness and realize what it is that you might be bringing to the relationship. And then beyond that, you also need to recognize that you can't control everything.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah. It comes back to that expectation conversation we had earlier, of like learning how to manage your own expectations so that you're not projecting onto another person. But let's just say that I spent a couple years being single, dating a lot of first dates, fewer second dates, even fewer third dates.
Yeah.
And it took me actually dating somebody longer than just 3 dates, 4 dates, 5 dates to learn even more about myself.
Yeah.
So in reflection of the other person that you're dating, seeing exclusively, or boyfriend, girlfriend, or a new husband or whatever, you can do all the work on your own, but to apply it and to actually see the results of it, you've got to test and be in a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's really hard, because you're such an individual for X amount of time, and then you bring somebody else who's an individual who hopefully has done their work too.
Right.
And now we have to adjust, be flexible, be dynamic.
Yeah.
That word that you use, I like it. And that moving target, another great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a dance, right?
Sure.
And
I don't dance well.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. But I think the more vulnerable you are in it, if you're willing to take that risk, the more fun you can have. And yeah.
Here's what I love about vulnerability in this particular case. Say you're dating somebody new and you choose to be vulnerable because you've gotten some development of trust as a foundation.
Right.
You choose to be vulnerable, and then it opens up this arena for the other person to be vulnerable too.
Right.
And if they're not capable or wanting to, and that in a reasonable amount of time be vulnerable back, then you've got a lot of answers.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might not be the right fit. But if you choose to be vulnerable and then they're vulnerable back because they've done their work or they choose to, or they trust you as well, that's where the beauty comes in.
I think that's really important feedback, though, that especially if you've been working on personal growth on your own for a long time, you can kind of get blinders on. The pendulum can swing too far in the opposite direction.
I've been told that, not too far in the distant past.
Well, I'm in no way accusing you. But,
no, we just met.
Yeah, but I do think that the feedback aspect that you're referring to is really important, and it's important for you to actually internalize that and take that in, and make sure that you're accounting for that.
Yeah, don't be closed off to it because life experience is the best teacher. And if you're so scared of getting into a relationship for fear of that being hurt again or the risk, then you're never going to see that. You're never going to learn above and beyond what you're doing for yourself currently.
Sure.
I love that blinders too. It's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't see the forest for the trees.
Completely.
You know, I got a lot of crap from my friends for having too strict of boundaries.
Okay.
But that's a self-preservation skill. It's not a compulsion. It's literally a developed skill so that I stay within healthy boundaries for myself.
Sure.
You know, you were talking about monogamy and heterosexuality and that same don't date your own type. You know, you can experiment, you can play, you can flirt with your own lines of boundaries.
Yeah.
But let's just say in the 2 years that I've been single, I know what I'm not comfortable with because I did test those boundaries.
Sure.
And I've come to the conclusion that this lane right here is where I need to stay so that I don't actually peaks and valleys too much in response to somebody else.
Right. Well, and some people, you'll hear about this every now and then, or I do as a coach in my line of work. But if you don't take the time, I think, to do some of that experimentation and self, exploration really, and figuring out what it is that you might like that you might not realize, sometimes you'll end up doing that in a relationship, or you'll find yourself being unfaithful or whatever it might be. Those things can come up, especially when you're sort of stuck in similar patterns and playing them out and perpetuating them subconsciously.
Yeah.
So it's good to really go into it eyes wide open, really understanding and owning and taking some self responsibility for what it is you want and what you don't want, and being able to just have visibility.
Yeah, taking personal responsibility is a learned skill as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If there's one thing that we either touched on briefly or didn't get to today that you want to leave us with, what would that be?
Let's see. I think that all of this, all of these topics, vulnerability, dating, especially post-divorce, all of it can be really intimidating, and don't rush it. Don't rush it. Take the time you need, because I think that that's more important, actually doing the work well and in a way that works for you with whatever tools, resources, community you might want or be willing to leverage. I think that is so important, having the process, doing it right for you. So I would say try not to be intimidated. I do have a lot of blog articles on various topics around all of these subjects, so please check those out if any of these topics resonated with you and you want to dive deeper. There's so many great books also, and podcasts and content on all of this. So I would just say, don't be intimidated, be hopeful, be excited, because things can be so amazing. And life is short, and and it's just, life is too amazing and beautiful to not experience it for all it's worth.
That's really well said. So what's new and upcoming for you that people would want to tune in and get a hold of you and follow you?
Totally. So I've had When It's Not Forever now for a couple of years, and I don't actually think I ever said what exactly When It's Not Forever is, but basically I created it. I'm a divorce consultant and coach, and I help people really navigate the divorce process if you're approaching, going through, or coming out of it and looking to recover from divorce. And so that's been my area, of genius, so to speak, for a couple of years now, and I'm absolutely loving it and continuing on with that. However, I am also adding another business in tandem that I'm equally passionate about and wanting to pursue. So I'm just spinning that out now. It's called the Marriage Maven. Very similar model in terms of coaching, but on the Marriage Maven side, it's all about what you should know before getting married. It's, again, a topic that is near and dear to my heart from my own life experience and seeing other friends navigate marriage and sometimes divorce, unfortunately, and just realizing that our society doesn't do a good job of educating and preparing people for what they really need to know going into marriage to hopefully have it be stronger, and also just more transparent. So really, what are the difficult conversations you should have before getting engaged? What are the legal implications of the marital contract? What is marital property? What does that mean? If you want to explore what is a prenup and the pros and cons potentially of a prenup, or when it might apply or not, be helpful or not, that's another topic I'd love to dive into with people through the Marriage Maven. There are all sorts of things in that area, but I want to create a betrothal boot camp that's basically a prep course for your marriage, because we spend thousands of dollars and so much time preparing for our weddings and wedding planning, and I feel like if we could even just put a modicum of time and energy into preparing for the actual marriage from more of a logistical administrative standpoint, I think that it could be hugely beneficial.
A marriage is not just one day, is it?
Right,
no.
Right. And we can get married so quickly. It takes 10 minutes. There are drive-thrus apparently in Las Vegas where you can get married. But it takes a minimum of 3 months to get divorced. And so it's really important, I think, that we dedicate more effort to preparing and going into marriage mindfully. Because I'm in no way anti-marriage, but I am very pro-education. And I think that we all have the right to understand what it is that we're getting into, so we can go in eyes wide open and hopefully make it better for everyone involved.
Yeah, I'm on board. Sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere close to getting married or popping the question or
but you'll be ready.
Engaged. I will be educated on the pros and cons of my decision in the future.
100%. That's all we can do, right? That's all we can do is bring
have
our
the most
best
information.
Yeah. Do our best, and if we go in and have done our best, then hopefully
we're rewarded for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, if your message resonates with people today, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Sure. So for now, the Marriage Maven is still getting spun up, so stay tuned for that. But the best ways to get a hold of me are, email kim@whenitsnotforever.com. That's KNOT, like tying the knot. On Instagram, When It's Not Forever, again, KNOT. Facebook, I have a business Facebook page, facebook.com/whenitsnotforever. Feel free to reach out, shoot me a message. You can also go to my website, whenitsnotforever.com, fill out the contact form, whatever it might be. And I do offer free initial consultations, have the blog, have a bunch of free resources I could send your way. So I'd be happy to connect.
Yeah, I'll put all those links in the show notes and the blog below.
Thanks.
So that people can easily get a hold of you, because I learned a lot.
I think we always learn a lot. I learned a lot from you as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
appreciate that. Definitely. Well, what do you say in the next 6 to 12 months we get together and we do a follow-up? We learn more about what the Marriage Maven is bringing to the table, as well as where you're at personally.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Because we're trying to build a community of authentic people here, and I think that's what we're